this is going to be one of the rare days where I get to cover actual good information that is coming off the internet. I hope you guys are ready for a more positive episode, but subsequently it will be an episode that has less of my input and is mostly relaying information that's coming from Aaron Reed. So I hope you guys are okay with that as well. For those of you who do not brave the torrents of Twitter, this episode is for y'all. But first, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the fan art section. So this piece of fan art right here comes from me not being able to click on my Discord button. This comes from Schlottenlight, said hello and bye-bye. Just wanted to drop this off here. I don't know Magic, so I don't know if this is even accurate. Rhino saying, I play the Meep. That's not how you play, Rhino. I said I play the Meep. So, no, this is entirely accurate. People don't know how to read their cards all the time anyway, so it's perfect. Thank you very much, Schlottenlight. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the post from Aaron that has good information for us, actually. So, from Aaron, she says that in a landmark ruling, the United States' Fourth Circuit of Appeals has ruled that gender identity is, in fact, a protected characteristic, and that state coverage bans on trans care are unconstitutional. This will have far-reaching impacts. The ruling, which was decided by the entire Fourth Circuit Court, says that transgender people are a protected... Good info. Stoff is now forcing me to use the Anime Exposed model. Stoff really sitting here willing to use all of their points on me being in this just thing for 40 minutes maximum. But okay, I'll expose your anime for you. Sure. God, we need to finish that series. Maybe on Monday. I try to finish the Anime Exposed series. The ruling, which was decided by the entire Fourth Circuit, says that transgender people are a protected class, and that trans discrimination is sex discrimination, overturning any state coverage bans. Okay. So attorneys for the state argued that the policies were not discriminatory because of the exclusion of Damn, I can't read. I'm so sorry. God, it's almost like if you're on Twitter, you could just go follow Aaron and it would be better content than what I'm spewing out at you right now. You know, because you could go follow Aaron for all the work she does, which is all very good. Please? Anyway, let me try that sentence again. Attorneys for the state argued that the policies were not discriminatory because the exclusions for trans care apply to everyone, not just trans people. Ah, yes, because it is equally illegal for a rich person and a poor person to sleep under a bridge, when only the poor person is going to be locked in that situation more often than not. Clueless Expert says, can you talk about what the Fourth Circuit means and how likely it is for the Supreme Court to fuck it up? So, the United States lower courts are divided into multiple circuits. The Supreme Court is made up of fewer judges than there are circuits in the United States, but each circuit is basically a small cluster of states that are typically geographically linked. So the Fourth Circuit just means that one of the lower courts that is above state level, but not quite to the SCOTUS level, determined that gender is a protected category and therefore you cannot take away rights to things like trans healthcare. That's what it means. That's what that means. How likely is it for the Supreme Court to fuck it up? It depends. So the Supreme Court would have to first believe that they could hear that case, which would mean that this decision, this landmark decision, would need to be appealed. There you go. Super Dragon says, like the said, how straight people also weren't allowed to get gay married. Yeah, straight people aren't allowed to get gay married either. If their best friend Tom wants to fuck them up a butt, you know, give them a little fingy in the bedroom, just for science, as bros do, that's equally illegal than if these two men love each other very much. That's equally illegal. Brutus Magnuson stares are just as available to the people in wheelchairs as they are the normal people. Yeah, no, I had to add normal because it made it sound way more condescending. Because that's basically what it is. Judges then rebuked the idea, citing older arguments that a ban on gay marriage applied to everyone gay and straight. Here's the exact area here. A tax on wearing a kippet would only apply to non-Jews and Jews alike, but would apply to non-Jews and Jews alike, but would only affect Jews. A ban on same-sex marriage would apply to straight, gay, lesbian, and bi people, but would only affect gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. Straight people would not choose to marry someone of the same sex. Finally, a literacy test only required of people whose ancestors were not allowed to vote before 1866 would apply to everyone, but would affect only black people. Put differently, all these barriers or bans, although they do not use the word Jews, gays, lesbians, bisexuals, or black people, targeted these groups by proxy, which is just as impermissible under the Equal Protection Clause. Yeah. So the literacy test, the reason they're bringing that up is we used to try to do that and say that, like, oh, this person can't do something because they are illiterate when they were, like, the child of a slave and therefore had no access to education. And therefore, instead of elevating them in society, we just kind of kept them down like assholes. Like, that's what that is for. She then says, for of particular note was a section on the Geduldig that seemed laser-targeted towards an eventual Supreme Court decision. Other courts have used this old ruling, which states that pregnancy discrimination isn't sex discrimination, to say trans care discrimination is not either. Interesting. Okay. They responded that gender dysphoria is so intimately related to transgender status as to be virtually indistinguishable from it. The excluded treatments aim at addressing incongruity between sex-assigned people at birth and gender identity, the very heart of the transgender status. Let me go ahead and take a look at the actual ruling that was put here. While it is true, we said in Geduldig that only women can become pregnant, it does not follow that every legal classification concerning pregnancy is sex-based classification. Thus, while Geduldig held pregnancy is not a proxy for sex, it does not hold the characteristics of a subset of a protected group that cannot be a proxy for that group. Second, gender dysphoria is so intimately related to transgender status as to be virtually indistinguishable from it. The excluded treatments aim at addressing the incongruity between sex assigned at birth and gender identity, the very heart of transgender status. In contrast to pregnancy, which is a condition that can be described entirely separately from a person's sex, gender dysphoria is often simply a medical term relied on to refer to the clinical distress that can result from transgender status. Finally, the exclusion cannot function without relying on direct, not just proxy-based discrimination. Also, I want to point out, I do like that language basically argues that a trans person who never experiences dysphoria is still a trans person, because it's not the distress that identifies them as trans, it's their brain going, hey, the gender the doctor told you you were, that one no worky no more. That, like, that is being trans in a nutshell. The doctor said yes, and you said no. And in this situation, you were right, because they can't read your brain. Brandon Fox says, I miss being able to listen to this weird guy speak while playing D2 before my ex made all my interests and things I enjoy illegal. What? I'm so confused. What? I feel like I missed a part of a conversation somewhere. Oof. Determining whether someone requires pregnancy-related treatment, the issue in Geduldig, does not turn or require injury to a protected characteristic. True, when a doctor determines a person is pregnant, they will generally, as a consequence, also have reached a conclusion about the person's sex assigned at birth, but this is true only because, as Geduldig recognized, pregnancy is often a reliable indicator of a person's sex. In contrast, determining whether a treatment like reduction, mammoplasty, it's highlighted, so I assume it's followed on here. No, it's not. That makes me sad. That makes me sad. But that is basically true. So it is true that mostly women get pregnant. It is true that when we say a person is pregnant, 99.99999% of the time, we are talking about a cis female. Trans men can also get pregnant. Oftentimes, we are not referring to them in that conversation because it doesn't happen as often for two factors. One, the actual medications that people go on when they transition do affect fertility. Not to the degree that people seem to think they do when they're like, if you do the transing, you're castrating yourself. No, it's literally you go on the medication and your fertility rate is lowered a little bit. Anywhere between 10 and 30% I've seen as a general rule, but people who are trans still have kids all the time. Which is the reason why in countries like Finland, it was only until recently that they were allowed to, you know, only have trans people if they got themselves castrated. They had to sterilize themselves in order to be legally recognized as trans. Something that wouldn't have to happen if the trans people got castrated by just transitioning. Because that's how that works. That's how words work. But, yeah, no, generally speaking, it makes sense. You can't just have a legal ruling where they're like, well, this is sex discrimination. No, it's not. What about trans men? Okay, hold on a second, motherfucker. Generally speaking, it is sex discrimination. There! Did I make it better? Did I make the conversation easier for you and your little ears? That's basically what that ruling is saying. Alt says Finland is fucked. No, they've overturned that ruling. People can transition there and get their legal status changed without having to get themselves chemically castrated now. Aaron then says, in particular, they point out how ridiculous the idea that just by using proxies, you could get around anti-discrimination laws. So, for instance, using XX or XY as a proxy to allow for sex discrimination laws because you don't use male or female. I said, but instead, whether there's a discriminatory reason for it, when there is proof that a discriminatory purpose has been a motivating factor in the decision, judicial deference is no longer justified. Especially where government budgets are involved, there will frequently be a rational basis for discrimination. A law that pays state employees with XX chromosomes, 75% of what state employees with XY chromosomes are paid has a rational, non-discriminatory reason. It saves large sums of money. But under the principle, dissent's framework, not only would that law be facially neutral, it would also be supported by a rational, non-discriminatory reason. A court, therefore, could not find the law discriminated on the basis of gender until it conducted a full-blown Arlington Heights evidentiary inquiry. This would require us to ignore the obvious. Ah, okay, so I see what they're saying there. Even though you can be in a situation where certain people are being paid less than others, and there may be a fully bigoted reason behind it, somebody could say, no, we were just doing budget cuts. Every company does budget cuts. And yeah, the conversation afterwards is, okay, yes, but why those budget cuts? Like, that's generally what happens after that. So that makes sense. That makes sense. So that's why they have these, that's why there's a ruling that they're working with where they're like, hey, gender is a protected category. Yes, there may be people who try to use this in a bad way, but generally speaking, by making this a protected category, it's going to do more good. It's going to lead to more net positive. Aaron Reed says, the court also rebuked recent arguments that Bostock applies only to the limited Title VII employment claims, a favorite argument on the far-right trans issues. Let's see here. Appellants argue that Bostock is the wrong standard because it was limited to Title VII claims involving employers who fired employees because they were gay or transgender. But there is nothing in Bostock to suggest the holding was that narrow. Appellants also argue that historically, in terms of Title IX jurisprudence, the term sex referred to the binary sex of male and female, and gender identity was understood as a distinct concept, but Bostock was based on that assumption. Because nothing in our approach to these cases turns on the outcome of these parties, historical debate, we proceed on the assumption that sex referred to biological distinction. So even if the definition of sex under Title IX encompasses only binary sex, West Virginia's policy would still violate the ACA. So Title VII. I'm not actually super familiar with Title VII, so let me go ahead and see here. Title VII, civil rights. Title VII protects employees and job applicants from employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Okay. Oh, were right-wingers basically just trying to say that, there was no discrimination. Your race wasn't discriminated against. Your color, your religion, your sex, your national origin wasn't the problem. And then they're like, yeah, but they were fired because they were gay. There wasn't discrimination because it didn't fall specifically under Title VII. Ultimately, the court ruled exclusions on trans care violate equal protection, and the West Virginia Medicaid program violates the Medicaid Act and anti-discriminatory provisions by the Affordable Care Act. This case will have national impacts, and states recognize that. 21 Republican states filed an amicus brief, supporting discrimination towards trans healthcare. 17 Democrat states filed briefs against. Okay, so we probably can expect this to go to the Supreme Court. If there's fighting about it, then the Supreme Court's probably going to hear about it next year. So, man, I really do hope we don't have a Republican president next year. That would kind of blow. She also goes on to say that it seems likely that this ruling will be used to challenge gender-affirming care bans in West Virginia, North Carolina, which are under the circuit court's jurisdiction, and this week, South Carolina is hearing a similar ban. So this is basically the Fourth Circuit going, hey, we see what the fuck y'all are doing. Here's this blanket statement that says that all of that will be bad and unconstitutional. Jess says it'll probably be heard later this year, November or December-ish. December is like a year away. I'm kidding, I know it's not. Jen says this decision is the latest in a web of legal battles concerning trans people. Earlier this week, the Fourth Circuit also ruled that Title IX protects trans students. Ooh. Fourth Circuit is doing a lot of good work then. On the other side, the Supreme Court narrowed a ruling, but not on the constitutionality of care itself. And then, of course, he says, stay with me and please support my work, which, again, I suggest you do. Mods should have already linked Erin's Twitter in the chat, and if y'all have not gone, please do so. But you could also find her at Erin in the Morn. She does a heck ton of work when it comes to trans issues and trying to bring awareness to the various ways in which politicians and lawmakers are either helping or hurting people who are trans. That is the entirety of, or not the entirety, but that is the gist of what you will find majorly on her Twitter. And it is incredibly useful information. I have probably done more videos on this channel using her resources than anything else that I've covered, and that includes using like Vice Rhino's trans care document. I haven't used that one anywhere near as much as I've used Erin's work. And it's a giant research document that's super helpful. So, Lightbuster says, I'm going to save for pick a model so I can force her to try to give Slime Cirrus the buff art. Jesus. But it's good news. Even though it might go to the Supreme Court and might end up having a fight against it later, basically having the Fourth Circuit Court go ahead and say, hey, gender and being trans are protected categories, so that if you try to do a blanket ban on that care, then we know that you're just doing it to hurt them. And saying that blanket care applies to everybody doesn't mean jack shit, when it's really only the trans people who are going to end up doing that in the first place. Anyway, yeah, it's progress nonetheless. Progress is progress is progress. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Progress is progress, and I'm happy it's progressing. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Nixie Chan, the Oberon team, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.